Radio Metropolis.
Welcome to the Suspense radio podcast here on Radio Metropolis. Tonight's story focuses on a mysterious serial killer, a reporter, and a police chief, and a rash of perfectly undetected murders. Thomas Burke's 1929 short story here about a serial strangler was considered a classic mystery in a brief time after its publication. The story was adapted for Suspense. It was also for theater and did appear in television. This Suspense version stars Claude Rains and Vincent Price. Peter Lorre was originally planned for the newspaper reporter's role, but was replaced by Price. It's a British story, but Price does not use a British accent in his portrayal while other actors do, yet Price's natural mid-Atlantic upper-crust accent somehow felt very much akin to the British dialect, as many people assumed Vincent Price was actually British. You know what? I did too, initially, because he sounds British. But that's I don't want to say stuffy, but it's that theater, that American theatrical accent that many have. Katharine Hepburn had it. Joan Bennett had it. There's many that came from the New York theater that had it. That sounded very. Kelsey Grammer has it. It's a very. I don't want to say affected, but it's a very rich, pure American hoi polloi accent that almost sounds British. But let's talk about Claude Rains. He's one of my favorite actors with a very distinguished career starring in Academy Award-winning films such as probably one of my all-time favorites, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, as well as a slew of Universal horror pictures, The Invisible Man, The Wolf Man, The Phantom of the Opera. And although he has a most distinguished voice, he had issues as a child. He had this thick Cockney accent, which you don't quite hear. And on top of that, he had a stutter. So through his vocal exercises and stage work, he transformed his voice into what we know is the smooth, cultured instrument that became his trademark. In fact, this is what carried him through The Invisible Man, 1933, for Universal, because he plays the Invisible Man. He's only briefly seen, I think in the beginning, there might be another point somewhere. I think it's still all in the beginning, and then again at the end when he dies. So his voice had to be the character, and that makes him the perfect radio actor because it's all in the voice. We all believe, I don't want to say we all believe, but I think the consensus is that Sir Laurence Olivier is the greatest actor of all time. I know many say, oh no, it's Marlon Brando. It's like, yeah, okay, Marlon Brando is probably the greatest film actor of all time, for many, not for me, but for many. But Laurence Olivier is considered the all-around greatest actor of all time. And you may find it interesting that Claude Rains was his teacher. He taught both Olivier and John Gielgud at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art in London. Rains was what has been called the elegant villain due to his charm, quiet danger, and moral ambiguity. I think you can pretty much say that about Vincent Price as well, too. And as far as Rains, we saw this elegant villain in roles as Senator Payne in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and also as Captain Renault in Casablanca. He led a rather decent life, no real scandals, although he was married 6 times. So he did have some issues there, but his reputation was always disciplined, private, and professional. He was in poor health for the last 2 years of his life and died of an intestinal hemorrhage on May 30th, 1967. Claude Rains was 77 years old. And Vincent Price is mostly known to us through many of his Poe roles and villains, but he was actually an art scholar and a gourmet cook who had published several books on each topic. During the 1950s, Price was briefly caught up in the paranoia of the Red Scare. He was questioned about his political views, pressured to sign loyalty oaths, and was even quietly blacklisted for just a short period. He later said the experience made him more outspoken about civil liberties and more determined to choose roles that let him laugh at fear. Vincent Price, to modern music audiences, is the great voice heard in the Michael Jackson Thriller song. He was paid $20,000, flat fee, no residuals, something he was way underpaid. I agree. For Brady Bunch fans, Vincent Price was featured in the Hawaii episodes as eccentric archaeologist Professor Whitehead and was regarded as very warm and engaging on set, keeping the younger cast entertained between takes. He agreed to do the role as a favor to creator Sherwood Schwartz, who had made a deal for Price to appear in a Season 4 episode of Gilligan's Island. That's the previous series that Schwartz produced. Everybody knows Gilligan's Island. And you're thinking, wait a minute, there were only three seasons of Gilligan's Island. Well, you're right about that. So Gilligan was canceled after Season 3, and here come the Brady Bunch. And this was an opportunity for Price to make that promised appearance in a Schwartz-produced show. And it was the Hawaii storyline in Season 4. In the late 80s, his health began to decline due to lung cancer, lifelong smoker. On October 25th, 1993, Vincent Price passed away from the disease at the age of 82. So let's get on with our show tonight about a mysterious serial killer who just can't be caught, and we'll find out why. This is The Hands of Mr. Ottermole from December 2nd, 1948, here on the Suspense radio podcast on Radio Metropolis.
Autolite and its 60,000 dealers and service stations bring you radio's outstanding theater of thrills. Starring tonight, Mr. Claude Rains and Mr. Vincent Price in Anton Leader's production of The Hands of Mr. Ottermole. A tale well calculated to keep you in suspense.
Tell me, Sergeant.
Yes?
Why do you think the Strangler killed the 5 times he did?
6 times, Mr. Newspaper Man.
6?
Yes.
Well, I suppose you do know as much about the Strangler as I do. How long have you been on the police force, Sergeant?
This is my 15th year as a member of His Majesty's Metropolitan Police, Mr. Newspaper Man. For 10 years, I walked the beats of the Casper Street station, and for the past 5 years, I've been a sergeant at that station. In 15 years, you learn a lot about many things, including murder.
Oh, yes, murder. It's a word and a deed which has fascinated more people than you and I could count. By all means, Sergeant, let's talk about murder.
You'd think there'd be little murder in such a district, wouldn't you, Mr. Newspaper Man? Murder for a bit of henning, cup of tea. There's nothing there to take except lives. And it was there that the Strangler came to practice his grim trade. Already he'd struck twice. Once on Lagos Street, once on Breen Street. His strong, white hands reaching for an unexpected throat. Then he'd vanished into the darkness, leaving behind something that once had been a living, breathing human. What was his gain? Perhaps no more than the satisfaction of a job well done. Perhaps he felt he'd done some poor devil a favor, that a sympathetic force led him to his victims the same as a cyclone picks one corner and misses another. I was thinking about that the night I first met you, Mr. Newspaper Man. I was walking down Malin End when I saw you, standing in the shadows.
Good evening, officer.
Stand where you are. Who are you?
From the Daily Herald, officer.
Oh, newspaper man, eh?
Yes.
What you doing here?
Oh, looking for a story. Are you expecting to catch the strangler, officer?
What would you know about the strangler, Mr. Newspaper Man?
Only that he likes your district and that you have no idea who he is.
That's right. He could be anybody who's about in this district at night. Perhaps even a newspaper man.
Oh, you suspect that I might be making my news before I write it? And I shall keep that in mind for dull days. Good night, sir.
All right. I watched you, Mr. Newspaper Man, as you walked away. Watched and thought of the force that moved the strangler. About the same time, that force, whatever it was, brought the strangler to Mr. Wybrow, an honest worker whom I've seen so many times I can tell you nearly exactly how he spent his last few minutes on Earth. I know the very sound of his footsteps, almost his every thought. And I can hear the footsteps of the man who followed him. It was 6 o'clock of an evening, and Mr. Wybrow was going home from work. He stepped off the tram at High Street and Malin End and walked slowly, wondering if his missus would have herring or haddock for his tea. It was a wretched night, and he could taste the fog in his throat, feel the dampness through the soles of his shoes. He turned down Lagos Street, and the footsteps behind turned with him. And so, one behind the other, the two men walked through Lagos and turned into Loyal Lane. Any man other than Mr. Wybrow might have heard some warning in the footsteps that followed him, something that said, "Beware. Beware. Beware." No. The foot of a killer falls just as quietly as the foot of any other worker. But those footfalls were bearing a pair of hands to Mr. Wybrow, and there is something in hands. Behind him, even then, those hands were flexing themselves, feeling the strength run down through the strong fingers. Mr. Wybrow was almost home. He turned down Casper Street, plodding along through the dim light. Small dog barked at the figures. Voices drifted out from the shabby houses, but Mr. Wybrow paid no attention to them or to the steps which followed him. Ahead of Mr. Wybrow was his own house, and he walked a little faster. Maybe it looked like he was going to get away, but the man behind only smiled and followed at the same pace. Mr. Wybrow turned in at his own gate and opened the door. He stepped inside.
Yes. What's for tea, Flossie?
Eddie, you're lucky to be getting that. Who's that?
How do I know before I've opened the door? If it's a collector, he can just nip off. Well, what?
And that is how Mr. and Mrs. Wybrow became the third and fourth, but not the last, victims of the strangling horror.
Did you ever stop to wonder at the pranks of fate? Mr. Wybrow died at the one moment when there was no one around to witness his death.
That's true.
A few minutes earlier, perhaps a few minutes later, there were people on the street. Think how different it might have been if you had arrived there earlier than you did.
Perhaps, Mr. Newspaper Man, but I'd finished my evening tea and was walking through Casper Street to the station. Mr. Wybrow was still lying on the door of his house, his wife on the floor a little beyond him. Both were dead. I blew my whistle, and the constable came on the run. We searched the house, then talked to the neighbors on either side. Nobody had heard anything except Mrs. Wybrow's scream, and they thought that just a family fight. There's no sign of anything but brutal murder. While we waited for the ambulance, I suddenly remembered something. Smithers.
Yes, sir?
Just before I found them, I saw you standing at the end of the lane. What were you up to there?
I thought I saw a suspicious character mucking about there, sir, and I was keeping an eye on him.
Suspicious character, but blasted. You don't want to look for suspicious characters. You want to look for murderers.
Yes, sir. Think we'll get him, sir?
Well, just between you and me, Smithers, I have my doubts. With a man who kills to get a few bob, you know he's going to keep on because as soon as he's broke, he'll slosh another one. But a man like this, you don't know when he'll strike again. Or if he'll strike again. Back at the station, the newspaper men were waiting for the story, having scented it the way dogs will smell out the fresh track of a fox. There was one newspaper man, tall, with shoulders and arms that looked more like a coal heaver than a journalist, who kept asking about clues as though he wanted to solve the case himself. That was you, Mr. Newspaper Man, or maybe you just wanted to find out how much we knew. After the newspaper men left, I was in my office, finishing up my report, when there was a knock on the door. Who's there?
Do you mind if I come in, Sergeant?
Oh, it's you.
Yes, I thought of a few more questions I'd like to ask you.
Oh, it seems to me you are around all the time.
So?
Yes. And now you want to ask more questions. I'm afraid we can't give out any more information than you already have.
Half a minute, Sergeant. All the papers are going to do a regular story on the strangling monster. I thought I'd like to do something different, more of a mood piece. Now, you look like an intelligent man, Sergeant.
Thanks.
Well, I thought you might help.
Well, maybe I can, maybe I can't. What do you want to know?
What sort of a man do you think the killer is? You really think he's a monster who can slip through the night without being seen?
No, I think he's probably a very ordinary man. Everyone, even our own constables, is looking for a monster instead of the man standing next to them. No, this man can move about and no one sees him because he's an ordinary man, and it's ordinary for him to be around. He might be a bootblack, the man who makes deliveries, or even a policeman. Or a journalist.
Why do you say that?
I don't think I meant anything personal, Mr. Newspaper Man. I meant that he's merely someone you look at and never think that maybe he might strangle someone.
Your theory is very interesting, Sergeant. And do you also think that you'll catch him?
Well, if he's caught, short of actually catching him in the act, it'll be because of only one thing.
Oh, and that is?
Curiosity.
Curiosity?
Yes. He'll be nabbed if his curiosity is too great. If he wonders how near others are to him. If he has to ask questions and then returns to ask still more questions. Later that evening, I went out into the district, visiting beat after beat. The presence of the killer, the strangling horror, was in the air. The entire district was given over, not to panic, for London never yields to that, but to fear of the unknown. And while the community still gasped over the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Wybrow, while fear was moving into every tenement, the killer made his next move. Conscious of the horror caused by his hands and as hungry for more as any giddy girl at her first performance in the music hall, his hands reached out again. Well, I was cutting through Clemming Street when I saw you again, Mr. Newspaper Man. You slipped along the street, peering into alleys. Even then I had a hunch to stop you, yet I felt I had no real reason to suspect you, so I walked on. Peterson and Joyner were patrolling Jarningham Road. It was just 9:32 when I met Joyner near the middle of the street. I spoke to him and went on. At 9:33, I met Peterson coming back from the other end of the street. I answered his greeting and passed, intending to go to the end of the beat and cut over to Logan Passage. Then, during the few seconds that everyone's back was turned towards the spot where he stood, the killer struck again. Joyner, here.
What the? Good heavens! It's Peterson!
Yeah, it's Peterson, dead like the rest of them, strangled right under our noses. Where were you, Joyner?
I just reached the end of my beat, Sergeant. Was already turning when I heard your whistle.
And I just passed him on my way to Logan.
Then we were covering both ends of the street. He must have come from Minnow Street, or Clemming Street, and gone back the same way before we could see him. It is dimly lit around here, sir.
Say, what's up, Constable? I heard...
Stand where you are. Oh. It's you, Mr. Newspaper Man?
Yes. So he struck again. What happened, Sergeant?
I've been checking the beats.
Huh.
I came up here, passing Joyner and then Peterson here. I was at this end of the street, Joyner at that, with Peterson in between us going towards Joyner. He cried out once, and then was like this. We saw no one. Where were you when you heard my whistle?
On Fleming Street, perhaps half a square down, and no one passed that way.
That means that he must have come from Minnow. Shall I ring in, sir?
Yeah, go ahead, Joyner. Half a square down Fleming Street, were you?
That's right.
That's where you were more than 5 minutes ago when I passed and you were coming this way.
Well, I thought I saw something in one of the alleys and stopped to look closer. Oh, now, come, Sergeant. Let's not start suspecting each other. The mutual suspicion of this district is catching.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Yes, of course.
Still, there's a murderer who must be caught, Mr. Newspaper Man. The following day, I was back on duty early. You know, the sight of a uniformed sergeant somehow gave the people a bit more confidence than that of the constables. You know, Bobbies are well enough in their way, but you know, your average Londoner likes to see more important officials around when things are a bit rough. The talk in the pubs and on the streets was all cut from the same cloth. And the pattern was fear.
I say the straggler's some posh who's off his beam. Thinks as though we ain't squeezed dry enough. So he nips over, squeezes a little more, and pops back to the West End.
Oh, you're balmy. He's a leg. Didn't he get a peeler last night, and don't that prove it?
He's a bleeding Jack the Ripper, that's what he is. And he'll bloody well kill a lot of us without a single bloody flick to stop him.
He got a bobby, didn't he? And with bobbies crawling all over the place and not one to lay a hand on him. And who's to stop him? That's what I want to know.
I walked the streets, dropping a bit of cheer here and there. 4 or 5 times I saw you again, Mr. Newspaper Man. Your dark face twisted with emotion as you listened to the talk. This, too, was queer, for you were the only newspaper man I saw in the whole district. By 9 o'clock, I was in Richards Lane, a narrow street, partly a stall market and partly cheap homes. On one side was the shattered wall of the railway yard. The wall of the railway yard put a shadow over the street so that even a garbage can looked like a man crouching. Farther down the street, the outline of the empty market stalls looked like a bunch of ghosts waiting for the man who would send them more ghosts. There was no one on the street, no one to witness that which was about to be. Then, suddenly, in the time between one footfall and another, the wall of silence was broken.
Help! He's here!
And then the lane came to life. It seemed like they were all released by that scream. All along the street, doors opened and people poured into the street, muttering as the stored-up anger began to overcome their fear. They milled around, uncertain which way to turn. Then the whistle pointed the direction to them. Gathering like dark clouds, they moved down on the cottage where I stood with the constables. The sight of so many of us made them feel that he would now be caught, and that anger came up in answer to it.
Well, go in and get him. What you waiting for?
He's through killing now. Go on and get him, you bloody peelers.
He ought to be strung up. That's what
Break it up. Move back, all of you. Joyner, get around to the back and meet the constables there. Martin, Addison, take the house on the left. Jones, Edmonds, take the house on the right. Betts, you come with me.
Save a piece of him for me, Sergeant.
Inside the cottage, a whole family lay dead, fallen around the supper table. One look at their necks showed us the strangler's trademark again, but there was nothing in that cottage except death. One by one, the constables came back to report. Nothing. Once more, he had killed and slipped away. Again, I looked out at the crowd, now beginning to move back as they realized we were empty-handed. Suddenly I saw in the front ranks your face again, the newspaper man who seemed to be everywhere I turned. There was a light in your face, a light that was almost happiness. And looking at you in that brief second, I was aware that there were two of us who now knew the identity of the murderer. But the crowd shifted back, began to lose themselves in the shadows, and you were gone before I could move. The strangler had struck again, and again. We were empty-handed as we waited for the ambulance.
You may have been empty-handed, Sergeant, but I'm sure there were enough thoughts in your head to make up for the lack of something to put your hands on. Dark thoughts, perhaps.
Yes, I did think, Mr. Newspaper Man. I tried to imagine what you were doing during the next hour. I thought perhaps that you went to the nearest pub and sat alone at the bar, attended by a frightened barmaid. I think you dismissed the strangling horror from your mind and thought only of the glass of stout and the sandwich, for even such men as you must rebuild their strength. I think you looked at the sandwich, noticing that it was skimpy, as bar sandwiches usually are, and you may have thought idly of the inventor of the sandwich, the Earl of Sandwich, then of George the Fourth, then of all the Georges, as any good Englishman might, and so to that George who wondered how the apple got into the apple dumpling. It was while thinking of that, and how the ham got into the ham sandwich, that your mind came back to the people who had been murdered. Maybe it was then that you thought of the simplest fact of all, that the murderer could escape by either running away or by standing still. It was then, I think, that you got up from the bar without finishing your sandwich. It was perhaps 20 minutes later that you walked down the street and met the man you were looking for.
Well, seen anything of the murderer, Sergeant?
Oh, it's you again.
Yes.
No, nor is anybody else. And I doubt if they ever will.
Oh, I don't know. He's already struck 5 times. I've been thinking about it, and I've got an idea.
So?
Yes. Came to me all of a sudden. And I felt that we'd all been blind. It's been staring us in the face.
Oh? Has it now? Well, if you're so sure, why not give us the benefit of it?
I'm going to. Yes, it seems quite simple now. But there's still one more point I don't quite understand. I mean the motive. Now, as man to man, tell me, Sergeant Ottermole, just why did you kill those inoffensive people?
Well, to tell the truth, Mr. Newspaper Man, I don't know. But I've got an idea, just like you. Everybody knows we can't control the workings of our mind. Ideas come into our heads without being asked. But everybody's supposed to be able to control his body. Why? We get our minds from heaven knows where, from people who were dead years before we were born, some say. Maybe we get our bodies the same way. Our faces, our legs, our hands. They aren't completely ours. And couldn't ideas come into our bodies like ideas come into our minds? Couldn't ideas live in muscles as well as in a brain? Couldn't it be that parts of our bodies aren't really us? And couldn't ideas come into them all of a sudden like ideas come into my hand? You see, Mr. Newspaper Man? It was 6. One other thing the newspaper man did while he was in that pub. He'd called his newspaper and told them his idea and said he was coming to meet me. And so they're hanging me, killing me for something which my hands did. I had nothing to do with it. You can see that. But what hurts me the most is what the judge said when he sentenced me. It's not true. It's not true, I tell you. That if I lived, someday these hands, my hands, they say, might reach out for you.
Thank you, Claude Rains and Vincent Price, for a splendid performance.
The Hands of Mr. Ottermole has always been one of my favorite mystery stories, and so it was a great pleasure to be able to play it on Suspense, one of my favorite radio programs. What about you, Vincent?
Well, I agree with you on both counts, Claude. And in addition, I found it refreshing to play the murder victim for a change instead of the murderer. By the way, Claude, what will we be hearing on Suspense next week?
A treat you won't want to miss. One of Hollywood's most glamorous stars, Miss Rosalind Russell, in a top story, The Sisters. Another gripping study in
Suspense.
Claude Rains will soon be seen in the Paramount picture The Sin of Abby Hunt. Vincent Price can currently be seen with Lana Turner, Gene Kelly, and June Allison in Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer's Technicolor production, The Three Musketeers. Tonight's suspense play was the famous story by Thomas Burke, adapted for radio by Ken Crossan, with music composed by Lucien Moraweck and conducted by Lud Gluskin. The entire production was under the direction of Anton M. Leader. In the coming weeks, Suspense will present such stars as James Cagney, Ronald Coleman, William Bendix, and others. Make it a point to listen each Thursday to Suspense, radio's outstanding theater of thrills. And next Thursday, same time, hear Rosalind Russell in The Sisters. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
And that was The Hands of Mr. Ottermole from December 2nd, 1948, here on the Suspense Radio Podcast on Radio Retropolis. This was the first suspense adaptation by Ken Crossan, who was a well-known mystery writer for television, radio, screenplays, and so forth. He was one of the founders of the Mystery Writers of America. He also did work on The Saint, Ellery Queen. He wrote for 77 Sunset Strip, Perry Mason, and many others. Now, the plot line of an insane random killer here in this story, who otherwise held a responsible and respected position, was very fresh at the time. And from today's vantage point, the story seems predictable because the plot device of an insane random killer is much more common in fiction and in media productions than it was today than it was 80 years ago. But in its time, this was disturbing because it was a man of position and power that you trusted, the policeman. Because this story is so well known, many of you probably already knew this outcome, and it wasn't difficult to figure out, even if you hadn't, to say that the police sergeant is the perpetrator of the crimes, the very person in charge of the investigation. But when the story first came out in 1931, a decade and a half before this particular suspense broadcast, people gasped at that revelation. In 1949, it received the award for Best Mystery Story of All Time by the Mystery Writers of America. A few years earlier, it was announced as the greatest of mysteries by a panel of writers and mystery connoisseurs. The Hands of Mr. Ottermole was performed twice on the Suspense television series. No kinescopes exist, however, or at least they haven't been found. The story was performed on June 28, 1949. This is again for television with Ralph Bell starring, and on November 28, 1950 with Lawrence Fletcher. Television fans are familiar with the story from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where it ran in its second season in May of 1957. And that will do it for us tonight. Enjoyed it simply for listening to both Claude Rains and Vincent Price. Not too much of a great mystery, because you have basically two people, so you knew one of them had to be it, and it couldn't have been the obvious one of Vincent Price. It had to be the guy that was doing the investigation. That's the twist. But at the time, it was, when it was written, because who would have thought that a man in a police uniform could do such a thing? That's The Hands of Mr. Ottermole from December 2nd, 1948, here on the Suspense Radio Podcast on Radio Metropolis.